All right, so we're back and ready to dive in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Today we're tackling Squid Game Season 2.
Ooh, interesting.
I know, right?
Yeah,
Big shoes to fill after that first season.
definitely.
So, everyone's asking, does it live up to the hype? Is it worth the binge?
The big questions.
Exactly. And to help us figure that out, we're dissecting this review from Collider.
Always a good source.
And let me tell you, it's a wild ride.
Oh, how so?
Well, just like the buzz around this season, the review is a total mix of praise and criticism.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. And I think we should address the elephant in the room right off the bat.
What's that?
Some people, felt Season 1 was a little heavy-handed with its message.
Right, I can see that.
So Collider gets right to it. Did Season 2 find some nuance? Did it evolve?
I'm curious to hear what they say.
Me too.
Hmm.
So one thing they point out is that this season spends way more time outside the actual games.
Interesting.
Yeah. We're following Gihun, our main guy, on his quest to, understand and expose the whole system behind the games.
So it's bigger than just the games themselves now.
That's what they're suggesting. And we also meet a bunch of new characters who are connected to the organizers.
Oh, so we're getting a peek behind the curtain.
Exactly. Less focus on the brutal competitions, more about the puppet masters.
So is that a good thing? Does it work?
Well, the reviewer seems to think so.
Really?
Yeah, they argue that this shift actually adds a whole layer of intrigue.
Okay, I can see that.
It goes beyond just watching people, fight for their lives.
Right.
It raises the stakes in a different way.
More psychological, maybe?
Exactly. And then there's the whole character development thing. The reviewer was super impressed with Lee Jung-jae.
Oh, the actor who plays Gi-hoon.
Yes. They say he's gone through a huge transformation since Season 1.
Wow, how do you even transform a character like that even further?
Right. I mean, the guy went through hell.
He did.
But the reviewer notes that he's much more eloquent now.
Interesting.
He's not the same straightforward, kind of simple guy we met in the first season.
Makes sense, I guess. Trauma changes people.
Exactly. It's like the games force this, evolution on him.
A dark evolution.
Totally. And then there's the front man.
Ooh, yeah, the mysterious masked figure.
Right. So in Season 2, his identity is finally revealed.
Oh, wow. I would have thought they'd keep that a secret.
You and me both. But get this, the reviewer actually sees this as a positive.
Really? I'd think that would ruin the mystique.
You'd think, right.
Yeah.
But they say learning more about the front man, played by Lee Byung-hun, makes him more complex.
Okay, so he's not just a one-dimensional villain.
Exactly. They say he becomes a much more interesting character.
More human, maybe. Flawed.
Yeah, like a real person,
Yeah.
not just some evil mastermind.
So what's his deal then? What's his backstory?
They hint at his past, his motivations, even a connection to Gavyu himself.
Whoa, that's juicy.
Right. It adds this whole other layer to the story.
A much-needed layer, it sounds like.
For sure. But of course, the review isn't all sunshine and roses.
Figured there had to be some downsides.
Oh, yeah. One criticism they had was the show's reliance on, you guessed it, tropes.
Uh-oh. You know how we feel about tropes.
The worst, right. So predictable.
Totally. So what did they call out specifically?
Well, for example, they mentioned this vengeful ex-rapper character.
Ugh. Yeah, seen that one before.
Right. And then there are the, predictable good guys and bad guys.
With the same old backstories we've heard a million times.
Exactly. So even though the games are new, the characters feel kind of recycled.
Like they took a shortcut instead of really digging deep.
That's the critique.
Yeah.
A missed opportunity to make those characters truly original.
Which could have added so much more to the story.
Totally. And the criticism doesn't stop there. Apparently, Season 2 also has a problem with over-explaining things.
Well, come on, not that.
I know, right? It's like they think the audience can't keep up.
Insulting, almost.
Right? Like they're spoon-feeding us the plot.
So frustrating.
I know. And they give this example of a relay race scene where it's, visually obvious what's happening.
Right.
But then the show still spells it out for you.
Ugh, why?
The reviewer says it just robs the show of suspense.
And makes it tedious, I bet.
Exactly. You're like, come on, trust us to figure it out.
Right. We're not dummies.
Exactly. It's like they're so focused on making sure everyone's on the same page that they forget to let the mystery unfold.
Yeah, sometimes the best storytelling is just letting things play out.
Totally agree. So we've got some good, some bad so far.
We're a mixed bag, for sure.
Intriguing new characters, a deeper dive into the world outside the games.
But also tropes and some clunky storytelling.
Yep. But wait, there's more. The reviewer also highlighted some, what they called, missed opportunities.
Oh, Like what?
Well, remember Hwang Jun-ho from season 1?
The police officer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Investigating the games.
Yeah, what happened to him? I was wondering about that.
He's back in season 2.
Oh, cool.
But the reviewer felt like his storyline and this potential connection between him, Gi-hoon, and the frontman wasn't fully explored.
Oh, what a bummer.
I know. It's like they had this gold mine of drama, but they barely scratched the surface.
That's so disappointing.
It is. It makes you wonder if they're prioritizing shock value over nuanced storytelling.
Right. Like they're teasing us with these threads, but not weaving them into a satisfying tapestry.
Exactly. And get this. The reviewer suggests that the most compelling stories actually lie outside the arena.
Whoa, that's deep.
Right. So maybe the real horror isn't the games themselves, but the system that created them.
I never thought of it that way.
Me neither. It's like we've been so focused on the who's going to survive part that we haven't really grappled with the why behind it all.
Wow. This is getting really interesting.
I know, right? We started with, is season 2 worth watching? And now we're questioning the whole premise of the show.
That's what I love about these deep dives.
Me too. They take us to unexpected places.
Exactly. It's not just about summarizing information. It's about connecting the dots, challenging assumptions.
And uncovering new layers of meaning.
Exactly.
Love it. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's unpack this idea that the most compelling stories lie outside the arena.
Okay, yeah.
What exactly did the reviewer mean by that?
Well, it's a pretty provocative idea, right? It challenges us to look beyond the surface, beyond the spectacle of the games.
Right.
And consider the forces that created them in the first place.
Like the root of the problem.
Exactly.
Instead of just the symptom.
Right. It's like we've been so caught up in the who's going to survive aspect that we haven't fully grappled with the why behind it all.
Exactly. And the Collider review kind of hints at this bigger picture in a few ways.
Okay, like how?
Well, they mentioned the frontman's backstory, for instance.
Oh, right. You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, so he was actually a former winner of the games.
Wait, really?
Yep, but then he chose to become a part of the organization.
Yo, that's crazy.
I know, right? It's kind of disturbing to think about someone going through that trauma and then willingly joining the very system that put them through it.
Totally. It's like, what would drive someone to do that?
Right. And the reviewer suggests his motivations are way more complex than just, typical villain stuff.
Okay, so there's more to him than meets the eye.
Exactly. They hint at the pressures he faced, the choices he had to make.
So maybe it wasn't a black and white decision for him.
Right. It's like Squid Game isn't just this simplistic good versus evil narrative.
More like shades of gray.
Totally. And maybe that's the point they're trying to make.
What do you mean?
Well, instead of just focusing on the players fighting to survive,
Right.
maybe the show is actually trying to explore the system that creates these desperate situations in the first place.
Oh, interesting. Like a commentary on society.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about those tropes we discussed earlier. The vengeful gambler, the desperate single parent.
Right.
Those are reflections of real-world issues.
Social problems, economic pressures.
Exactly. Things that drive people to make extreme choices.
So you're saying those tropes, while predictable, might actually serve a purpose.
Maybe. By using those familiar archetypes, the show might be trying to hold a mirror up to society.
To make us confront the systems that create these situations.
Exactly. It's like saying the show itself is a commentary on the very things it's depicting.
Whoa, that's kind of meta.
Right. And it makes you wonder if Squid Game is more self-aware than we initially give it credit for.
That's a good point.
But that also brings us back to those missed opportunities the reviewer mentioned.
You mean like Hwang Jun-ho's investigation?
Exactly. If the show really wanted to explore those deeper societal issues,
Those systemic problems.
yeah, it needs to go beyond just hinting at them.
So instead of just showing us the shocking consequences of the games,
We need to understand the root causes.
the how and the why.
Exactly. Think about the front man.
Okay.
Why did he choose to become a part of that organization?
Right. What were the forces that led him to that point?
Exactly. It makes you think about all the real-world parallels.
Like what?
Predatory lending practices, economic inequality.
The ways in which people are manipulated into risky situations.
Yes. With promises of easy money, a quick fix.
And that's where those missed opportunities become even more frustrating.
Right. Like imagine if the show had really delved into Hwang Jun-ho's investigation.
Oh, yeah.
We could have seen the inner workings of the organization, the economic and political forces that support it.
We could have seen the ripple effect of the games, how they impact not just the players, but the families, the communities.
Fabric of society itself.
Exactly. Those are the stories that could have elevated Squid Game from a thrilling but ultimately surface-level drama to a truly insightful commentary on the human condition.
Totally agree. But hold on a second.
What is it?
The reviewer also mentioned something about emotional manipulation.
Oh, right. I was wondering about that.
What do they mean by that?
Well, that's where the analysis gets even more interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's not just about what happens in the story, but how the show is presented, the techniques they use to evoke specific emotions from the viewer.
So it's about those cinematic choices, the way they frame certain shots, the music, the editing.
Exactly. The review talked about the use of slow motion, close-ups during key moments, things like that.
Right.
And they argue that those techniques can heighten the emotional impact,
Sure.
but they also run the risk of feeling manipulative.
So it's a fine line between creating a powerful experience for the viewer and actually manipulating their feelings.
Exactly. And that's a debate worth having.
For sure.
Is Squid Game using these techniques effectively,
Right.
adding layers of meaning?
Or are they just trying to shock and awe the audience?
Right, that's the question.
Well, that's something we can unpack in more detail as we go through specific examples.
Good.
But first, I'm curious to hear your take on this idea of emotional manipulation in general.
Okay, shoot.
Do you think it's always a bad thing?
That's a great question, and it's one that requires some nuance.
Okay, lay it on me.
Because on the one hand, all storytelling is, to some extent, a form of manipulation.
Wait, really? Explain that.
Think about it. Any good storyteller is going to use techniques to engage the audience, to draw them into the story and make them feel something.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
But it's about the intent behind those techniques, the choices the creators make.
So how do we tell the difference between manipulation that enhances the story and manipulation that feels like cheap or exploitative?
That's where critical thinking comes in.
Okay.
We need to become aware of those techniques, those cinematic choices, and ask ourselves why they're being used.
So, like, what's the purpose?
Exactly. Are they serving the story?
Or are they just trying to elicit a cheap emotional response?
Right. And that's the key difference.
Right.
And that's the key difference.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it.
It's subtle, but important.
So we need to be more aware of how a show is trying to make us feel.
Exactly.
But that seems kind of hard to do while you're, caught up in the story.
It can be, for sure.
Like you're just trying to enjoy it.
Right. But with practice, it becomes second nature.
Okay, so like a learned skill.
Yeah, think of it like learning a new language. At first, you're just focused on the individual words, the grammar rules.
Right.
But over time, you start to understand the nuances,
The deeper meaning.
the subtext, the emotions behind the language.
I see.
It's like you're not just reading the words anymore, you're experiencing them.
That's a good way to put it.
So how do we apply that to a show like Squid Game?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
What are some specific things we should be looking for?
Right, give me the cheat sheet.
Well, think about those slow motion shots, the close-ups we talked about.
Okay.
Ask yourself, what are they trying to highlight? What emotions are they trying to evoke?
So it's not just about whether it looks cool.
Right. It's about understanding the purpose.
Okay, so like, what's the point of that particular shot?
Exactly. Are they trying to build suspense? Generate sympathy for a character? Or maybe even make you question your own values?
Whoa, that's deep.
Right. It's all about intention.
So it's not about judging the technique itself as good or bad,
Right.
but understanding its purpose within the story.
Exactly. And once you start to see those patterns, you can evaluate whether those techniques are being used effectively.
And authentically.
That's a great word for it. Authentically.
You mean like, are they being honest with the audience?
That's a great way to put it. A good storyteller will use those techniques to enhance the story,
Right.
to draw you in, to make you think and feel.
But in a way that feels real.
Exactly.
Wow.
Genuine and earned. But sometimes those techniques are used in a way that feels manipulative.
Like they're trying to force a reaction.
Right, like they're trying to control your emotions for their own benefit.
That's kind of creepy when you think about it.
It can be. It's like the difference between a friend sharing a deeply personal story
Right.
and a salesperson using emotional tactics to pressure you into a purchase.
Oh, I see what you mean.
With a friend, there's trust, authenticity.
A shared experience.
Right. But a salesperson has an agenda.
Yeah, they just want your money.
Exactly. So how do we know when a show is crossing that line? How can we tell if it's manipulating us?
That's the million-dollar question.
It's not always easy, but there are some red flags to watch for.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Does the show rely on cheap tricks or shock value to get a reaction? Does it oversimplify complex issues? Does it exploit sensitive topics just for entertainment value?
So it's about being a mindful viewer,
Exactly.
paying attention to how the show is trying to influence us,
Right.
and being willing to question those tactics.
And ultimately, it's about trusting your own gut.
Really?
If something feels manipulative, if it feels like you're being emotionally strong-armed,
Like you're trying to trick you?
right, there's a good chance you are.
Interesting. This conversation has really given me a lot to think about.
I'm glad to hear that.
I feel like I'm going to be watching Squid Game and really all shows
Yeah.
in a whole new way.
That's fantastic, because critical thinking isn't about being cynical or negative.
Right. I get that.
It's about being an active participant in the stories we consume.
Engaging with them on a deeper level.
Exactly, and ultimately getting more out of the experience.
So, to bring it back to Squid Game Season 2,
Okay.
what's the final verdict? Worth watching or skip it?
I'd say it's definitely worth watching, but with that critical eye we've been talking about,
Okay.
there are definitely some strengths, particularly the performances
Yeah.
and the exploration of the world beyond the games.
Right, like we talked about.
But be aware of those tropes, the tendency to over-explain.
And those moments where the emotional manipulation might feel a little forced.
Exactly. Don't just let the show wash over you.
Be an active participant.
Right. Engage with it. Question it.
And remember, the most compelling stories might lie outside the arena.
That's the big takeaway.
So keep those critical thinking skills sharp.
Always.
And who knows, maybe we'll revisit Squid Game in a future episode.
I'd be down for that.
Me too. See if it lives up to its full potential.
I'm curious to see where they go with it.
Me too.
Yeah.
But for now, I think we've covered a lot of ground
We have
and hopefully given our listeners a lot to think about.
food for thought.
Exactly. So thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.